Hi, I'm Greg Hunter, and this is the weekly news wrap up for Friday, June 29th, 2012. Well, Obamacare, or the Affordable Health Care Act, has been upheld by a 5-4 decision in the Supreme Court of the United States. And to that I say, how are you going to pay for this? I was watching the mainstream media, and I was watching the liberal side of the mainstream media, and they were absolutely giddy about this. And one of their fact checkers came out and said that, it's only going to be $1 trillion over the next 10 years. What? $1 trillion? Got on the internet. The GAO came out in March of this year and rescored this thing and said it'll cost at least $1.76 trillion over the next 10 years, and more than likely it'll be $2 trillion. Program hasn't even really started yet. Now, we've been told all along that this was not a tax. It's not a tax. They would tell you it's not a tax, and we find out in the Supreme Court it's a tax, and it's in Congress's purview to tax. Okay, fine. This is something that is going to be tremendously expensive. And what you're really talking about is insuring an additional 40 million people. How are you going to pay for that? I can tell you how. The people who can buy health insurance and have the money are going to have to pay for the 40 million people who cannot, or will not in some cases, buy health insurance. That's how this is going to get paid for. It'll be paid for through taxes, increased premiums, ration care. This is how this is going to get paid for. Period. The end. I'm sure the Obama administration loves this, takes the spotlight off the economy and onto healthcare, a signature piece of his legislation. And you got to admit, he did get this done. And he got it upheld in the Supreme Court. So, like him or not, he did it. But the Republicans say that they're going to be able to repeal and replace. Really? With what? How are you going to ensure an additional 40 million people, I should say up to 40 million people, and it not really cost anything? And no, they can't do that. You just can't. And, this really comes at a time in the country when we're drowning in debt. Our leaders are completely ignoring the fact that we have a $16 trillion deficit, and we're adding to the debt. As we're increasing the debt ceiling by a couple of $1 trillion at a pop, we are adding to the commitments of the country. We should be cutting things. But instead, we're growing the government, we're growing the IRS, we're growing the healthcare system, when we are absolutely in dire straits when it comes to the economy, when it comes to our deficit situation. I mean, some people say if you add everything up, Medicare, Medicaid, banker bailouts, prescription drugs, Social Security, that's, in the red or going to be in the red soon. If you add all this stuff up, we've got about $100 trillion commitment. And Lawrence Kotlikoff at Boston University, the economist up there, says if you added up his math, says it's more like over $200 trillion in debt and commitments. And we're adding to the debt of the country. Yeah, I know you have sick people and you got to take care of them, but we're in deep trouble, financially speaking. And eventually the market's going to take care of this. I mean, we are right now, before Obamacare, we're borrowing more than 40 cents of every dollar to get what we're getting right now. And we're adding now another layer of healthcare and another layer of government. And this is supposed to be cost-free. It will not be cost-free. It absolutely, positively not. I don't care which party is pitching which plan, including the Obamacare. It's going to be massively expensive. And eventually the market is going to come in and tell you whether or not you really can do this. It's going to come in and do that for you. It's going to come in and do that for you with the lack of funds, super high inflation, people stop buying our bonds, our credit rating being cut, all that and much more. Meanwhile, Congress has voted to hold Attorney General Eric Holder in contempt for not turning over documents in the Fast and Furious gun running case. Now, my theory on this, I don't care which party is in power in Congress, and right now it is the Republicans. The judicial branch, the legislative branch, and the executive branch, in other words, the Supreme Court, Congress, House, and Senate, and the Obama administration, the executive branch, they are tri-equal. They are equal. The Obama administration, the executive branch, does not supersede Congress. They cannot pat them on the head, tunk, 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 and say, you don't need that. That's overreaching. It's a witch hunt. You're going to use it for political purposes. Whatever reason that Congress wants these documents, it is in their congressional purview and right to get them. Now, are they going to walk over to Eric Holder's office and, throw cuffs on him and throw him in the slammer? No. This is going to be a bunch of political bickering and fighting back and forth and distract the country from the real problem, and that is we are drowning in debt? Yes. Yes. Eventually, they're going to end up giving them the documents, but we are in deep doo-doo. Oh, we're going to hit the debt ceiling here probably before the November election. We're going to hit it once again. We're going to be out of money. That's what I'm talking about. The market will eventually tell you what you can and cannot do. How are we going to borrow another $2 trillion this time? I suspect it'll be 400 billion to get us past the election to the end of the year, and they'll threaten, one party will threaten the other one with you're shutting down the government. But the fact remains, we're 16 trillion and counting in debt. Our real annual deficits aren't a trillion or trillion two or trillion three. According to USA Today and people like John Williams long before them, is really, generally accepted accounting principles. We're hitting 5 trillion annual deficits, and we're bickering over healthcare and bickering over, constitutional fighting with Eric Holder in contempt of Congress, which I think he should give the documents. It would make the country go a lot smoother, and the whole thing will be over before November anyway. Congress has the right to get the documents, no matter who's in power. I'm not taking the side of the Republicans. If the Democrats were asking the same thing of the White House, I'd say, yeah, they are equal in power to the executive branch. Let's follow the Constitution. That's my thing. Meanwhile, we're also taking our mind off the Middle East. They're ratcheting up these sanctions that are kicking in July, for the Iranian oil market over there, and that they're going to embargo oil into the European Union from Iran. This is happening in July 1st. They just had a meeting in Russia with the US, UK, Germany, France, China, and Russia and Iran over its nuclear program. Of course, not in the meeting. They ended the meeting with only, let's agree to have another meeting. Nothing else happened. Nothing at all. I've asked this question before. How long does Israel wait? Whether it is or isn't a real threat, Israel thinks the Iranian nuclear program is a real threat. So do other big countries in the world, including the U.S. Now, the Iranians say that their nuclear program is for the peaceful production of energy. That said, have you seen what's going on in Syria? We've been basically told that the U.S. is just giving humanitarian aid, and this week, Ron Paul on the floor of Congress said, BS on that. Through our surrogates, we are arming the Syrian rebels, which part of them are Al-Qaeda. I thought we were supposed to be against them. Also, reports of British boots on the ground in Syria. A friend of mine from Iran, who is now a U.S. citizen, speaks Farsi fluently, says, Israel can't attack Iran. The U.S. can't attack Iran until Syria is knocked down. That's just too big of a military power to the north of Israel. Hamas, yes, they'll cause some problems, but they don't have an army, tanks, airplanes, jet fighters, Navy. Hamas doesn't have that. But Syria sure does. And of course, they're backed by Russia and China. And by the way, are we lost on the fact that the Russians have a major naval base, not a big one, but a major one that basically supports its nuclear powered ships in the Eastern Mediterranean? Are the Russians just going to walk away and say, oh, you want this? Oh, you want Syria? Yeah, no problem. We're in some dreamscape. And here back at home, the big deal is the healthcare, and the big deal is this Holder thing this past week. And here we are inching and getting up to our necks in Syria and inching towards war. And now Iran, because these sanctions are going to kick in, they're threatening to once again shut down the Strait of Hormuz. 18% of the world's oil goes through there? That would certainly require a military action from the Western world at the very least. And we are basically ignoring reality. And Anne Ryan says, you know, you can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of reality. On a smaller note, the $2 billion trading loss in risky derivatives that JP Morgan reported, a little more than a month ago, has turned into, according to the New York Times, a $9 billion trading loss. This is a bank with FDIC backing, gambling basically in derivatives. They're not making car loans, house loans. They're not, giving loans for factories or IPOs. This is just derivatives gambling. They call it hedging. But to me, it's just out and out gambling, and it's got a taxpayer guarantee attached to it. Meanwhile, in the European Union, the situation over there has not gotten any better whatsoever. Now, the European Central Bank is talking about cutting interest rates to zero or below. They're wanting to have a unified Eurobond. In other words, take the European debt of Spain, Italy, France, whoever, and put it in one bond throughout all 17 members. And for the people who are, drowning in debt, that's a great idea. For people like Germany, bad idea. They're like, whoa, wait a minute. We don't want to take on any more debt. We got to take on the debt of everybody just to save the European Union. No telling how that's going to actually work out. But when faced with massive default, deflation, and insolvency of the banking institutions, I suspect they'll choose to print money. And really, that's what is really being the eye taken off the ball here. I mean, we have massive amounts of insolvency in the global financial system. Banks, countries, states, are teetering on insolvency so bad in Europe and in the United States, they changed the accounting rules for how they value these underwater assets. They can value them at par. So the long and short of it is that all the stuff about healthcare, which is an important issue, but compared to the insolvency of the world financial system and the next oncoming crisis, it's not really that important. We have to fix the financial system first and figure out how much money we have to spend. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. Thank you for supporting USAWatchdog.com.